Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Thomas. Today we are back here with VC Andrews with another old versus new. And, well, glad to get a head start on this one. This one's on Rack Shack and Benny. So, apparently there was a remake of VeggieTales videos. I never thought I'd see the day. Honestly, I haven't heard much of the VeggieTales in a long time. I do remember watching the video from, like, the Microwave Society when they're reacting to some of the old stuff on VeggieTales, you know, the Lord of the Rings, Jonah, and all that. Man, wait. But anyway, looks like we got an Easter one here. At least that's what I'm thinking, but who knows. So let's check out the remake of VeggieTales and see which one's better. Be sure to like, subscribe for more. I hope you enjoy. Let's check out Rack Shack Benny.
Hey fans, it's the VC Critiquer. Well, there's two things in this world that a lot of kids seem to hate. It's going to church and vegetables. That is until two brilliant animators in the early 90s named Phil Fisher and Mike Nawrocki came up with a revolutionary way to overcome this. Put the two together. And it was through this simple idea that resulted in an animation breakthrough called VeggieTales.
Yeah, where most Christian home video movie series are lucky to be remembered by the people who grew up with them as kids, VeggieTales very quickly became the most successful and popular Christian animated series in the entire world. And it should be. It had unforgettable characters, clever gags, pop culture references that usually didn't feel too forced, and most of all, it knew how to preach the word of God to children. It didn't feel too preachy like something from Focus on the Family, which for those of you who don't know is a conservative Christian organization with extremely anti-feminist and LGBTQ views that I have a particular disliking for. But it also never felt like a corporate show trying to pander to the public like the Righteous Gemstones or with Thought on Ice.
Let's put the Christ back in Christmas. Raise our voices loud.
By the way, if you're wondering what my thoughts on the boys is, I think the protagonists are so-so. Well, except Starlight. I do like her a lot, but I freaking love how creative the show is with its political and corporate satires, and holy Okay, Lord, because I'm reviewing Christian base, I'll use good place censorship for this review. Holy shirt are these villains batshit insane. Okay, we're getting off track. Essentially, VeggieTales was what Bible Man wanted to be, but never quite knew how to execute. Preaching God's word effectively, but in a way that would appeal to modern-age kids. It basically was a
true, and not really, like, shoved down your throat, too, in a way. Which, in a way, you watch it, you don't feel like you're watching something Christian. I mean, unless they tell you. And kind of preaches it without a way of actually preaching it. Which, gotta love sometimes, you know? It's not really the main focus, it's more like they sprinkle it in to be like, okay, right there. Perfect. There, message received. Think of like subliminal messaging in a way, you know? Enjoyed the fun and realized, hey, I learned something Christian today. Sorry, I had to say it like that, but anyway.
Preacher with a sense of humor of Animaniacs. Because of this series made for 5-year-olds is beloved not just by many adults, but also by many atheists and agnostics. That is quite an accomplishment, needless to say. And I myself owe it to
goes to show they love to make fun of themselves.
Several Bible stories like Daniel in the Lion's Den, Joshua in the Battle of Jericho, David and Bathsheba, the Good Samaritan, and more. Well, just a few months ago, on YouTube was posted possibly the most impressive and professional fan-made remake ever posted in the history of YouTube. And it just happened to be a remake of one of the series' most beloved installments, Rack, Shack, and Benny. Now, for those who don't know, Rack, Shack, and Benny was essentially the Bart gets an F for VeggieTales.
Kiss the teacher!
No, not story-wise, they have nothing in common there. I meant on the impact it had on the show. Like The Simpsons, the series was already fairly popular very early in its run, but this is the episode that basically set the standard for what made the series such a phenomenon. Not only was this the first full 30-minute episode with more songs and also slightly better animation, but this was also when the series started to dive into grimmer content and more mature biblical values for kids, namely the tale of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and how they learned the importance of standing up for their faith and what was right, like not eating foods forbidden for Jewish people at the time or worshipping anything other than God, and how sometimes it would pay off, but a lot more times, unfortunately, people will put you down for it, even literally sometimes, like when the narcissistic King Nebuchadnezzar attempted to burn the trio alive for their refusal to worship a 90-foot golden idol of himself. Yeah, kind of a step up from the first two installments' more lighthearted mortals, like facing your fears, forgiving others, loving your neighbors. Yeah, this one has a much more grown-up message about the cost of doing what's right, but how it's worth it in the end, and does not sugarcoat the danger of being burned alive, and was also one of the earliest examples of VeggieTales' trademark of setting Bible stories in a completely different setting and time period, in this case being a chocolate bunny factory where the trio are underpaid and underage blue-collar workers instead of outright slaves. Now that the stories doesn't go pretty dark in this direction as well, though. And this setting change tactic proved successful for the show, and how it got away with teaching about David and Bathsheba, namely by putting it in a medieval fairy tale setting. Anyway, point is, this installment at first glance seems like the last one anyone should dare mess with. It's one of the franchise's most beloved episodes, and essentially set the bar for what would lead to the show's success. But nonetheless, I was so curious when I discovered this video, and kept an open mind going in.
So he launched him into the stratosphere.
And my world was rocked because, yes, for the most part, this YouTube fan-made remake is significantly better than the original Rack, Shack, and Benny episode itself. That statement itself may sound sacrilegious, but yes, this is indeed a massive improvement over the already amazing original. How is this possible?
You know, I was hoping you'd ask.
Now, just as a heads up, this old versus new is going to be more of a general comparison of the two works, kind of like the NC's comparison of Teen Titans or the two Haunting movies. I just felt the comparisons here work better that way than doing it by categories. And again, if you find it just as much of a sacrilege as the Bunny song that I prefer a fan-made remake over one of the show's biggest turning points, please note that, one,
remember,
this is only opinion-based,
they're the same story.
and two, that's not completely the case. So why don't you munch on some chocolate bunnies, but don't eat too many because...
we shouldn't eat very much candy because it's not very good for us.
As we take a look at old versus
so
new,
with that.
Rack, Shack,
and Benny.
At the Desert Chocolate Factory.
That's really kind of like it's just like remolded.
Okay, so the countertop intro that sets the episode's moral peer pressure up is pretty much the same as the original, where Larry insists on wearing an oven mitt over his head since Veggie Beat magazine says it's in style even if it impacts his vision, and their letter being from some kid named Dexter wanting to know how to avoid looking lame with his best friend since he doesn't want to watch a show that's not glorifying to God. Nothing too much to compare in the countertop intro, but I do love this bit where Larry's head only turns further away when Bob calls out to him. And then we get into our actual biblical tale coated in chocolate, and I think you already see a noticeable difference. Whereas the original Rack, Shack, and Benny was clearly the original Bible story set in modern times, this version is more creative, where the story seems to be set in kind of a retro universe that's a mix of the original Babylonian setting, the Roaring Twenties, and modern times all in one. That's much more creative and allows for a variety of more visual gags. Like, you may notice how a lot of inscriptions on the factory walls are actually written in Babylonian. That's just brilliant. And another obvious strength is the animation is 10 times better than in the original. Please know that Big Ideas was one of the earliest computer animation studios out there, and this installment was still a pretty big step up from the quality of their previous installments. But it still can't even hold a candle to what we have here, not just with the textures and more detailed backgrounds, but the characters here are just so much more expressive. Like, compare the shots of their expressions singing the opening song about how they hate their miserable below minimum wage jobs at this place.
Because we work real hard at the chocolate factory. We start at 8 and we don't get lunch till 3. Because we work real hard at the chocolate factory. We start at 8 and we don't get lunch till 3.
We used to laugh and run.
Now there's no time to play cause we gotta work all day.
We used to laugh and run.
Now there's no time to play cause we gotta work all day.
These expressions definitely better capture their dissatisfaction with their jobs. Another big strength is that they're actually freaking working in this version. Come on, freaking is not a true curse word. But yeah, even when I was 5 years old and first saw the original video, I remember thinking to myself, you lazy benches literally just have to stand there and supervise this fully automated assembly line. I'd be a little more appreciative. I understand now.
True, I mean, just keep an eye on the thing. Doesn't seem that too hard. Like, when you're looking at it, just be like, I mean, I could probably listen to music while doing that, but they're just all the... yeah, you can't really see more of it's like a manual process than the last one. Oof. Which, fair enough. I'm surprised with the first one they didn't do that, but again, you're playing the animation style for that. And or just the technology back in the day. You know? I mean, I'm not too sure what they used, but I can definitely see why they couldn't. Anyway.
That was probably due to animation budget limits, but it still makes the workers seem pretty entitled given how they're griping so much about really having to do nothing. It's clearly established here that they have to work a variety of different types of manual labor, so you can see why they're so exhausted and dissatisfied with their dog shirt wages that they receive. And of course, there's many more fun gags that this allows for. Like, compare their reactions when Mr. Nezzer announces that Nezzer Chocolate has just sold its 2 millionth chocolate bunny. Now that reaction seems much more believable. Why should they give a shirt about that? They don't get any of the profits and are probably thinking,
worse on the original.
Now it's going to make us start working graveyard shifts. But keep in mind, the more professional looking animation isn't always a strength of the story. Like, look at this bit.
But Mr. Nazar says you can't.
That creepy close-up in the original really helped convey on smug pleasure making his employees' lives miserable. Or look at Laura's reaction when Mr. Nezzer says they can all eat as many bunnies as they want for the next 30 minutes in celebration of their 2 millionth sale. Just look at that face. She looks like she's having a seizure while she's... Well, I don't want to directly say it because, one, she's a kid, and two, this is a Christian-themed story, but I'm sure you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It's so much funnier than Lenny's "Endless Bunnies" line in the remake. And on the subject of the workers, I'm pretty torn about whether they should have included other veggie characters in the story as factory workers, like Archibald, Scooter, the French Peas, Jimmy and Jerry, and more. Yes, I know that Bob and Larry are grown-ups, but they're playing children around Junior's age in the story, and are somewhat believable as such with their high voices and childish personalities. But other characters like Archibald and Scooter are very clearly grown-ups and couldn't pass as kids to save themselves from a salad. Where am I going with this? Well, while the addition of these characters is a fun touch and shows a lot more effort from the animation department than just lazily copying and pasting the rest of the staff like in the original, it kind of hampers a bit of the emotional impact of the original Rack Shack and Benny. In that version, it was clearly stated that the factory line was made entirely of children. Actually, it says so in this version too. Guys, I know the audio is mostly archived here, but I mean, couldn't you have trimmed that part out or something? But my big point is, I feel that having the entirety of the factory workers be illegally employed children was an effective way to translate the theme of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego being slaves kidnapped from their homes in Israel living in ancient Babylon. Hell, it's not outright stated, but it's very heavily implied that all these children's parents sent them here because they were so dirt poor and wanted them to have a life where they could at least earn enough to feed themselves, and lied to them saying they were being sent there as a way to help the family out so they could all be back together again one day.
Someday they'll come and join us. We'll live in harmony.
Yeah, I hate to break it to ya, but your parents probably said that to keep your hopes up. They're probably not ever going to have the money to get out of poverty again. So having adults included in the situation somewhat hampers the dark emotional impact and representation of slavery the story was going for. But on the bright side, another advantage it does have is it kind of...
Yeah, true. I mean, I don't know if they could get away with that, but... I mean, I guess they didn't have a lot of kid characters to go with in VeggieTales. So, it does... I mean, it would be kind of cool if they did that. Not endorse child labor, we already went through that in history. By the way, they did employ a lot of child labor back in the day. You know, even though, like, Assassin's Creed Syndicate, they're pretty close. Just saying. You'd be surprised how many people would just send their kids off to the factory to work. Have fun, kids! Make sure to get a lot of money for us! Oh, she dead? Nah, never heard her. That's pretty much their, like, idea toward, like, workers back in the day. I'm not kidding. They even had their, like, the kids were... basically work in the gears in the factories, for what I've heard. I mean, think about it. 90 bodies? Boom, boom. Got it. Heck, you see it in Snowpiercer. The kids were made to replace the parts of the train. Not kidding. Look at the movie. You'd be surprised. Anyway.
It makes the whole standing up for your faith and against peer pressure more meaningful, I guess. It's one thing to stand up against your peers not acting in a good way, but to see grown-ups who are supposed to be your role models makes the resistance to peer pressure all the more hard and thus more meaningful. And I'm totally on board for giving Mr. Nezzer a full board of executives in addition to our trio when they get promoted to this when they're the only ones not laying down the job due to eating too much candy, especially since a few of them are VeggieTales villains like Goliath, the Bad Apple, and... what was your name again, sleazy Tim Curry-like scallion?
They've never given me a name.
Ouch.
I've been around since show 1 and I still don't have a name.
That's unfortunate, because you were one of my favorite bad guys on the show as a kid. Though, to be honest, I kind of wish we got to see more VeggieTales villains as corporate executives, like the Fib from Outer Space, the Rumor Weed. Even Charlie Pincher would have been a nice touch. Though on the subject of executives, I really love the boys' junior executive outfits they get.
Remasters, I don't think
more
they're
impressive than just
introduced.
the ties they get like in the original, and they're just fun outfits, to be honest. And of course, there's the music. As great as the original score by Kurt Heineck was, this music really beefs it up and gives a big jazzy 1920s ragtime feel to it, which fits as part of the 1920s retroverse this version is set in. Well, Think of Me Every Day gets more of an emotional beef up, topped off with a much more expressive Baby Junior, or Shaq in this case. But anyway, yeah, the original Good Morning George was never really one of my favorite VeggieTales songs, but this cover of it is easily the best song in the entire remake. I also like how the Bunny song's instrumentals are played a couple times early in the film as kind of a foreshadowing for later. And yes, let's talk about the Bunny song. A song meant to represent the idea of idolatry and to be a song you shouldn't sing. And as insanely catchy as the original Bunny song was, the 1920s ragtime treatment just makes it a natural springtime for Hitler. A song you know you shouldn't sing, but every bone in your body just is dying to. Which I guess fits with the whole peer pressure vibe they're going for. Also love how Mr. Nezzer wears a pimp outfit while singing the song, and how the other female backup singers have more of a strip club feel to them. The ones in the original had a bit of this vibe too, but it was much more subtle given their target audience. These ladies definitely feel like they pay to hook up with guys. Though, for better or worse, this version uses the censored version of the Bunny song. What do I mean? Well, I think it's time for a bit of trivia. You know that the reception of Rack, Shack, and Benny wasn't 100% kudos at the time. See, in the first edition, the creators took the whole unacceptable song concept a bit too much to heart, and there were two exceptionally disturbing lyrics in the original Bunny song.
Whoa, I love the bunny. I don't love my mom or my dad, just the bunny. I won't go to church, and I won't go to school. That stuff is for sissies. Do you kiss your mother with that mouth?
Phil Fisher later explained that since this was supposed to be a song that kids weren't supposed to sing, they had tried to make that as painfully obvious as possible. But since the song was so damn catchy,
a little too much on the head there,
audience didn't seem to give a fork about that, and were proudly singing the song in public, thus resulting in a ton of hate mail from angry parents. Phil Vischer later admitted
that was a definite
go a bit too far with the whole negative content of the song. So in the second edition, this is what they dubbed the lines to.
Whoa, I love the bunny. I don't love my soup or my bread, just the bunny. I won't eat no beans, and I won't eat tofu. That stuff is for sissies.
I don't know, I think they could have worked in some joke where maybe Mr. Nezzer could have been like, oh wait, no, that song didn't test well with the focus group. Yeah, that could have been easily done with AI voice or something. Well, regardless, this version is still big and...
Then again, with the whole negative context with, the AI stuff, yeah, bad idea. Bad idea. Just saying, if they did that, I'm pretty sure this remake would not get a lot of love. Yeah. Just saying, bad idea. I get the mom-dad thing, but woof. So, how much more I bet that the animators behind the remake were just like, well, we can't find the first edition, we'll just have to use the second. That's what I'm thinking. Like I said, I don't know. Hard to say if we couldn't or could, but I don't know. Would you guys mind if they used the uncensored one? I don't know. I'm not even sure what I would use, but the soup? What? I was just out of nowhere. I don't know. Let me know what you guys would add, because I got nothing in my head. I got nothing. Anyway.
Improvement over the original. And then, just like in the original, Rack not so silly asks what will happen if someone, very obviously them, doesn't want to sing that kind of song. And Mr. Nezzer's response is,
if you don't bow down and sing the song, you're a bad bunny.
You don't mean...
And then we get another thing I was kind of disappointed about here. In this version, the ceremony unveiling the 90-foot bunny takes place in a conference room that has a 1920s speakeasy vibe to it. While it does look pretty nice, the original felt a lot like a Nazi podium, with Mr. Nezzer making a speech just like Adolf Hitler. I just felt that gave the story more of a darker feel, and on top of that, while I do love the design of the bunny a lot more in this version, that thing is definitely not 90 feet high. No, that's about 15 feet at best, and it's painfully
I
obvious.
give it 20.
Although one thing I do love here is, unlike the original, where the other workers just immediately bow down to the bunny without a moment's hesitation, here, they clearly look like they don't want to betray the Lord either, but just don't have the testosterone that Rack, Shack, and Benny do. I also love how there's a lot more depth to what happens after the boys refuse to bow down and sing the song, and instead sing the Think of Me Every Day song, like Mr. Nezer contemplating on whether he wants to execute his new junior executives, Benny being the only one not to see through Nezer's very obvious sarcasm when he calls their song beautiful and plans to sing it himself.
As I throw you into the furnace, God sees them!
And another nice touch is, unlike the original that flat out revealed what Laura's plan to help the boys was, this one leaves it vague before cutting to the silly song, thus making it all the more suspenseful. Speaking of which, is there any way that this version enhances said silly song, The Dance of the Cucumber? Not too much, but then again, there wasn't too much to improve that already pretty freaking funny song. But the mariachi band is a nice addition, and I also love this bit they added with Bob.
Say peas.
Peas.
Huh?
Really?
Okay, so like in the original, Nezer gives the boys one last chance to redeem themselves and sing the song, but they politely decline, leading Nezer to only one possible conclusion.
That you're bad buddies!
But Laura's there to save them, and while I love how it's the other executives chasing them instead of the obviously copy and pasted security guards in the original, this does bring a small nitpick. The remake features much more creative ways in which the gang loses the guards, as opposed to them falling into a vat of chocolate like in the original. But the thing is, I think this was meant to be a G-rated substitute for how the guards who shoved Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the fiery furnace ended up getting burned alive because of how hot the flames were. So unfortunately, it also makes the film a bit less biblically accurate, but I suppose that's not really a huge deal in the long run. So if you don't know the drill...
Again, with the different changes, you know, like without the... them. Those references. I guess they didn't want, you know, YouTube to be like, hate speech, get him! You know, that kind of deal. Yeah. Like I said, can't say them out loud, so I guess they don't want to run the risk with YouTube and just be like, what? Here you go. That'd work. At least, like I said, that's what I'm thinking, but, anywho, move on.
They wind up back in Nezer's clutches, he seizes control of the truck, and Lunt's prepared to dump them into the furnace. Although one thing that kind of confused me was, right before this, the remake has a pretty pointless bit.
The bunny, whoa, I love the bunny.
What was even the joke there? That Goliath was lying there unconscious, and the guard's just using a vending machine like nothing's out of the ordinary?
Maybe?
That's
not
really funny, guys. And also kind of slows down the pacing of that really intense moment.
You know?
Another thing I was kind of torn about is, this version drops the part where Laura pulls the plug, but the boys fall into the furnace anyway. It was filler, sure, but maybe they could have done a bit where Laura tries to pull the plug, but then a guard stops her. It would have been a great example of what TV Tropes calls not his sled. Although we do get a nice reference to Toy Story 3 as the boys are about to fall in, and then we get what I personally consider to be the biggest improvement the remake offers to us, one of the greatest examples of less is more in movie history. Look at Mr. Nezer's reaction when the boys have supposedly been burned alive in the original.
Nobody's ever gonna stand up to me again!
That is ungodly cruel, sure, but look at his reaction in the remake now. Now, isn't that just so much more cold-hearted?
More like
At least as in the original considered their supposed deaths to be a triumph that ensured his dictatorship, total office authority, would never be questioned again. Here, Nezer thinks so little of the trio, he doesn't even have a reaction at all, or even say a word about the matter.
Yeah, that's
He literally
more
does
like,
consider them just garbage. So it's crazy, but Nezer's blank, nonchalant stare and walking away without saying a word is somehow much more cold-blooded and despicable than his diabolical laugh over their deaths in the original. But of course, if you haven't brushed up on your scripture, God is there to protect the trio from their dooms. Really, the only thing I have to compare here is the music. It's a lot like the NC's comparisons of God in the Ten Commandments and Prince of Egypt review. Both scores have a divine, otherworldly feel to them, and also have intensity, but the original score didn't seem very loving. I don't know, it kind of makes Lord's presence in the scene feel more unsettling, and not super
more
welcoming,
Old Testament.
to be honest.
Yeah, I could see
the
that.
music that plays during the scene in the remake still has that divine otherworldliness to it and intensity, but you can still feel the warm love of God in the music as well. And I love how Nezra looks petrified after the Lord departs from saving the boys, not to mention him not frickin' smiling when he realizes he was wrong to try and blackmail the boys into doing bad stuff like in the original. His look here feels so much more remorseful and sincere. Of course, the boys accept his apology, and it's topped off with a nice ragtime rendition of the classic VeggieTales song, Stand. And while it does sound very good and better than the original version, I didn't feel it was quite as beefed up or catchy as their renditions of Good Morning George or the Bunny song. It sounded better, sure, but watch these versions back to back.
When everybody tells you that you gotta be cool, remember what you learned in church and Sunday school. When everybody tells you that you gotta be cool, remember what you learned in church and Sunday school.
See, not as quite as much of a quality upgrade with the music as with the other songs. Although I do love the more choreographed dancing that goes on in this version. Though I was crushed they dropped the part of the factory dancing like in the original. That scene always made me smile. And as for the countertop finale, rinse and repeat of the original. Bob and Larry explain the moral of the episode. Bob uses a spoon to seesaw Larry out of the sink, but failed to consider how he'd get out himself. And Larry wraps up for getting to help Bob get out of the sink. But really the only thing I have to point out here is another negative for the remake. For some reason, this version drops Bob's sadistic smile before pouring water on Larry as payback for singing the What We Have Learned song. Just for some context, there was a gag on that show where Bob had a similar opinion of that song to Murray reactions to the Fly Away song from Hilda and would try to avoid it at any cost, but without much luck. You know, speaking of which... Nah, let's not give him any ideas.
But, all things considered, as crazy as it sounds, the fan-made YouTube remake of Rack Shack and Benny is actually better than the original overall.
Like said before, I'm not in favor with all of the changes they made, and some I have more mixed feelings for, but looking back at both works overall, the changes did seem to be a major improvement to the story for the most part. And again, both versions are great satires of the biblical tale of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and really succeed in conveying its message and standing up for your faith in what's right, both under peer pressure and with the threat of execution. And kind of like with the Color Purple review, the timing for me to do this kind of review was pretty convenient, let's just say, though I would rather not go into details as to why. It's kind of personal. But as they say, the medium is the message, and even if the more primitive and awkward CGI of the original did make some parts of the story stronger, the more professional and higher budget animation of the remake does seem to do the story more justice overall, and topped off with a much grander musical score, more creativity with the setting, the visuals, and the gags, and featuring possibly the greatest less is more instance in film history, I do have to give it the victory point here.
Phil, Mike, words cannot describe the impact your show had on me as a kid or my faith in God, but yes, the YouTube community actually managed to improve one of your greatest works ever. So, point in victory, go to the new.
The new.
You're a bad bunny.
Why you are, sir? Honestly, I was with them. The new one actually does have a little more oomph to it, if you ask me. What do you guys think? You agree? You disagree? Let me know. I know to check out Rack Shack Benny later. Anyway, till next time. Adios.